Alrighty, folks, I am back to video. I am back here with episode number 97 of YWC Football Talk. Again, not much closer to 100. I'll be there right before you know it. And he's going to pop up in a second on the screen. But I've been on his show a few times, but I figured, you know what, I'm going to return the favor. It's Jordan from the Sports Dude Heniz Show. How are we feeling tonight?
I'm doing really good. Thanks so much for having me and everything.
You know what? No problem. I just realized tonight, too, as we're getting much, much closer towards the start of the football season, it's just you got to talk to as many teams as you can to get everyone's perspective on their teams. And by the little orange shoulder pads with the black stripes, I have a hunch you're a Bengals fan. Just a little, you know.
Yeah, just a lot. I mean, had season tickets since I was about 7 or 8 years old. Diehard Bengals fan. I like them more each year. It's really hard to like them more, but my fandom is pretty much, super, super high. Cannot wait, for the season.
So with that being said, though, are your expectations because obviously it was a 4-11-1 season last year. Now we have the 17th game coming in. Where do you see this team realistically in 2021?
I keep looking back at the schedule, with the 17 games instead of 16. To me, that makes a huge difference on how many wins we will have and a huge difference on if Zach Taylor should keep his job or not. Because if it was 16, I don't think you're going to be expecting as many wins. But with an extra game, I think you should be maybe expecting an extra win, maybe an upset win or so. When I look at the schedule every single time, I keep going back to 7-10, 9-8. I think we're capable of having a 500 season or better, but it's just a matter if we can put it all together. I just really, I'm not trying to be biased. I'm one of the least biased Bengal fans there are, but when you really look at our team, Joe Burrow's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL, but he is coming off a season-ending injury. We have Mixon, who I know when it comes to fantasy purposes, not many people like him, but I think he's going to have a huge year. With Jamar Chase, our offensive line is way more, much better than people think, and I just really think we will surprise some people regardless, because I've seen some people have us 3 and 4 wins, which is just absolutely pathetic. But 7 to 10 wins, I would say 10 wins at the absolute max. But if I would have to say a record prediction right now, I'm probably going to say 8-9.
You know what? That's kind of my whole thing. I was going to say something else, but I'm going to go back to the whole Zach Taylor note. My whole note of it is, even if you guys end up winning, say 6 or 7, as long as you can be competitive or, catch a couple teams off guard, like obviously the Steelers game last year, Monday Night Football, the Tennessee Titans, even to beat a couple of teams like that, and even more, because I know you guys play like San Francisco's the extra game. You also got, I believe, the NFC North and then the AFC West. So if there's a couple teams in there, like not saying like necessarily wins, but if there's games where you guys are like highly competitive, like even the 2 against Cleveland last year, the Thursday nighter and then the one Sunday, if you can be competitive in those games, it's kind of like Zach Taylor, I think, buying an extra year. And I do agree with you. If it was 16, I think it's harder for him to keep his job. But if it's, since that extra game's added in there, and there's that whole potential of, hey, look, there's an extra game, and you can say, look, Joe, it's Joe's first full season playing. Give me another year at it. And then if after year 3, there's nothing really there, then they can go. But it all depends on what the Brown family really wants to do.
And something with the extra game to me really has more pressure on Zach Taylor, because if it was 16 games, I would expect maybe 6 wins, 7 maybe. But with 17 games, in my opinion, and I've said this, and I'm one of the few Bengal fans who are not completely sold on Zach Taylor. If Zach Taylor does not get us 7 wins this season, because you're looking at the schedule, I think we are definitely capable of getting 7 wins. I think we can have an upset win. Definitely beat Pittsburgh once, possibly beat Cleveland. You mentioned, we almost beat Cleveland, both games actually, but we are capable of having 7 wins. So I think anything less than 7, Taylor has to go, like you said, first full season under Burrow, Mixon, Chase, Higgins, Boyd. I mean, that they're one of the most underrated wide receiver groups in the NFL, and something to really keep an eye on. I was looking the other day. Our last 3 games of the regular season, I cannot remember which ones are away or home, but we play the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Browns. More than likely, that's going to be a 3-game losing streak to end the season. And I mean, that's definitely not going to end the season on a high note. If we lose all three, regardless what our record is up to those final three games, I think that has a significant chance. If we lose all three, that Taylor could actually be fired.
Yeah, because that just leaves a sour taste in the fans' mouths. I always say, like, you want to go into 2020, like on this, I was going to say 2021 back in January, but now for 22, you want to go in thinking, hey, look, we showed some promise towards the end of the year. How can we get better? If you lose those games, like you said, it's just only kind of like going back down the mountain when you're trying to ascend on top of the mountain. I could also see a world where it's like the Anthony Lynn firing from this year, where, you know, it's like, hey, thank you for your service, but we need to get someone better, because obviously there's going to be a lot more good coaching candidates out there, like Joe Brady, Brian Daboll, even blanking on the guy's name from Iowa State, Matt Campbell.
Campbell. Matt Campbell.
Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Just to name a few, or even Pat. I know Pat Fitzgerald signed a huge extension with Northwestern, but there's always names that, like, look, money can lure people in a lot of different directions. Or even two, there's some coaching firings you didn't see coming, and those guys get scooped up immediately. Even the division too is just very intriguing, because, like, you guys, you don't really know what you're going to get. It's the same with Pittsburgh. I feel like we don't really know what Ben says. He's on this like new diet, like he's TB12. I only do air quotes because it's kind of hard to believe, where it's just like, okay, I'm so used to seeing the photo of Ben with like the big like ice packs, both knees, shoulder, just like the tensor bandage, walking around the Pittsburgh Steelers facility, you know. So besides the Ravens and the Browns, you like, I'm not saying anything bad about the Bengals. I'm just saying for you guys and the Steelers, it's kind of like the let's wait and see what we get. It's like opening your gifts on Christmas morning. You don't know what's under the tree.
Yeah, with the AFC North, honestly, I think the AFC North, you know, despite, you know, let's say 2011 and 2015, we were one of the best divisions in the NFL because the Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens were consistently in the playoffs all those years. And I really feel like the AFC North is one of the best divisions right now. I know I'm not trying to sound biased, but with our roster being so underrated and people don't know what to expect from us, you know, the Steelers, I mean, they're the Steelers. I mean, I hate them more than any other team, but and they won the AFC North last season. They're probably the most successful team or franchise in NFL history. I mean, I know you're a big Patriots fan, but the fact that you have three coaches in your entire franchise is just absolutely insane. And then you have the Browns, who I think is clearly the favorite in the AFC. The Ravens, I am not high on at all. I think they're going to have a down year. I think they're definitely still a playoff caliber team. But I mean, I think the AFC North is definitely one of the best divisions in all the NFL. And I know I keep saying I'm trying not to be biased, but the Bengals will not finish last in the AFC North. I said it last year, and looking back, I know it was crazy, but there was things I just really thought that could happen. Especially, you know, the Steelers, the last 4 games of the season, you're talking about ending on a high note. The Jets and the Bengals had a better record against than the Steelers did the last 4 games of the year. Roethlisberger is not getting any younger. He's getting worse each game. I just really feel like the Bengals will not finish last in the AFC North. It's going to surprise lots of people, but I really think it's going to happen, that the Steelers will be last in the AFC North.
You know, it's nothing crazy to think about. Like, part of me thinks that the 2021 Steelers are going to be like what? Like, I'm just going to give a personal example. The 2019 Patriots, or even like last year's Steelers team, like where their defense is bailing them out of a lot of games, where Ben's not maybe putting up the best numbers. The cast, because like the cast with the Steelers is so weird. I know they drafted Harris in the first round, so we'll see. But people are saying, oh, you know what, go get Najee for fantasy, when their offensive line I do not trust. Ben is he's definitely on the back 9. He's on like hole 16 or 17 of his NFL career, if not 18. And then the receiving core, hell, 2 of them would prefer to do TikTok at Fortnite than try to get better at their positions. Like, we even saw it last year when Von Bell lit up Juju on that Monday night game. Like, I always remember that game thinking, like I'm going to be honest with you, I thought that game was going to be, you know what, hey, here come the Steelers, they're going to get back on track and they'll go to the playoffs and be fine. But no, you guys decided to say, no, that's not happening here. But I'm not even afraid to admit it. My pick to win the North already is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns by far the best team in that division. The only other thing I'll say, though, with the AFC North, so I saw your video from earlier today about the NFC West. The NFC West, I think, is the best overall. We have the best 4 overall teams, but your division is the toughest because you don't know what you're going to get from all 4 teams, even though we do expect good from Cleveland, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. And then you guys are just that, like, you're working in the trenches, just like kind of like a lion waiting to pounce on a gazelle, you know?
And I think that's a good way to put it, because you already know what you're kind of going to get from the Browns, because they're amazing roster and everything. You know what you're going to get from the Ravens. They're going to run the ball down your throat regardless if they're winning or losing, and they're going to, if their offense doesn't play good, their defense will bail them out and they'll win. That kind of, it's the same way with the Steelers. Their offense is a question mark because you don't know how Roethlisberger is going to perform this season, but their defense will bail them out, kind of like how it did this past season. But with us, I just kind of feel like we're going to surprise some people, and I kind of feel like we're going to surprise some people because just people think our expectations are so low, like 4 wins or something like 4 or 5 wins, which I just do not understand at all. And, we have lots of players back coming back from season-ending injuries, like Burrow, Joe Mixon, DJ Reader, who was our big signing last season. We have some nice additions, and we had a decent draft, but I just really feel like we will surprise some people. And you also mentioned with the NFC West of the Cardinals, that video I did, the NFC West is just, they're up there with the AFC North in the best division in the league. I had the Cardinals, I believe, going 8-9, but if the Cardinals were in any other division, I would 100% have them in the playoffs. I think they're a nice team, but with the Rams, the Seahawks, and Russell Wilson be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and also the 49ers, who are one of the better rosters in the league, I just think it's very difficult to see the Cardinals in the playoffs.
I'm going to go the same way with you. Like, I always like the Cardinals. I like Kyler Murray. I think Cliff Kingsbury is the one coach, and everyone says who has the hottest seat in the NFL. It's Cliff, because everyone came in expecting, look, 5-11 the first year was kind of a pad. Actually, wait, 5-9-1, excuse me, 5-10-1. Like the first year was like, okay, cool, we'll improve on that. Then last year, I believe they finished 8-8, which they fell off. They were 6-3 going into the back half of the season. Then Kyler got hurt against Seattle on Thursday night, and then kind of went down from there. But this year too, like, I know they signed JJ Watt, but then they added AJ Green, James Conner, Malcolm Butler. They're kind of taking flyers on guys, hoping they're pan out. It's like that's always what Steve Keim's agenda is, where he does that. And then his draft was okay. Like, they had Zaven Collins, they added Rondale Moore from Purdue. The Cardinals are like, it's that thing. It's like you want to see it succeed, but you don't know if it will. That's the thing. And also too, going back to what I said earlier about you guys being like a lion waiting in the weeds, I should have said Bengal Tiger. I apologize for that. But and then the NFC West, like, you look at it, San Francisco is going to be back and healthy. Like, I literally, before we came on here, I saw George Kittle on my Instagram Discover page, like, working out, like, stuff. He looks ready to go. Debo Samuel is going to be back. Nick Bosa is going to be back. The Kinlaw's in his second year on defense. So my only questions with those two teams, though, is how is the Niners going to look without Saleh and Mike LaFleur? Because obviously those two are now in New York with LaFleur running Saleh's offense with the Jets. The Rams, I think, are the best. I love the Matt Stafford angle, because everyone's gonna be like, oh my God, where did this quarterback come from? And everyone can just be like, he was wasted away for the last 12 years in Detroit. So it's a big look at the NFC. I was gonna say wait and see, but I feel like with the Seahawks, I just don't know. I don't know what to think of the Seattle Seahawks. I think they can be good. Their defense, a lot of question marks there. But then, because like last year was weird. There was the first half, offense was great, defense was okay. Then they flipped the roles back, and then they still managed to win the division, but then they lost to John Wolford in a half man, half Jared Goff in the wild card round. So you don't really know what to get with Seattle. So if I had to pick a winner from that division right now, I'm going to go with the Rams.
The fact that John Wolford has more playoff wins than Andy Dalton is kind of embarrassing.
That's
I mean, that goes back to how good the Rams are. The fact that they win with a guy you've never heard of going into a playoff game, and they beat Russell Wilson, who's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And what you said, the first half, Russell Wilson was an MVP candidate. He was right beside Rodgers. Second half, they literally did a 180. It was crazy how horrible Wilson was the second half of the season. And the 49ers, I think if they have Garoppolo the first half of the season, or if, Trey Lance would start week 1, which I don't think that would happen. Regardless if it's Trey Lance or Garoppolo, I can definitely see San Francisco having a 10-plus win season. I mean, they have a great roster. Going back to the Seahawks, I honestly do not know if they will be in the playoffs. I think they're one of the more overrated teams in the league. And it kind of goes back to, if they were in any other division, they would be in the playoffs. With the Rams, I really think they're the team to beat in the division. And we mentioned it with the Cardinals. Since 2016, people are talking about the J.J. Watt signing and the A.J. Green signing. Since 2016, J.J. Watt has only had one season where he's had 10-plus sacks. Since 2016, A.J. Green has only had one season with 1,000 receiving yards. They drafted in the first round with Zaven Collins, a linebacker from Tulsa, and that was kind of a questionable pick. And we saw just a month or so ago that he's getting arrested. I do not think Arizona is this team to beat or this underrated team that people think. Honestly, I think they're more overrated than they are underrated.
I want you to look this up. You can look it up now or you can look it up when you're done, but go look because Steve Keim became GM of that team in 2013. I've talked about this before. Up until he drafted Murray in 2019, he has one of the worst first round picks, like just like a slew of them from 13 to 18. None of them panned out. Like DJ Humphries did in his like later on, but like for immediate impact, the only guys he's had is Murray and Simmons. Besides that, none of his first round picks have panned out. He always takes like a blind shot in the dark at someone and says like, hey, you know what, come here, rise up Red Sea, like let's win it for the Valley. And he hasn't succeeded at that. And then like even too, if you look at a lot of his free agent signings, it's like the names I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of guys on not even second chances, but it's guys who are older or it's guys looking for another chance, like Connor Butler, and then even the older with the Watt and the Green, like JJ Watt's still JJ Watt, but I don't think you're getting the defensive player of the year that was a force for Houston during the mid 2010s, like where it was like him, Brian Cushing, Whitney Merciless, guys like that, like those defenses where like 2013, 14, 15, 16, you're not getting that JJ Watt. Like he could still be great, but at the same time too, the other thing with him and Green, very injury prone. So if they get hurt, they're screwed.
I mentioned that stat with JJ Watt, but talking bad about the Cardinals, but something good about the Cardinals is I believe since 2011, the top two players in the NFL who has the most sacks, I don't know who's 1 and 2, but I know they're top two. That is JJ Watt and Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones is coming back from a season-end injury, and going into last season, he was actually my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. Not including last season, he had 48 sacks in 3 years. You can't even get that on Madden at times. Like that is incredibly great. I mean, you saw him, because you're a big Patriots fan. He's extremely underrated. But one thing with JJ Watt, I mean, you mentioned the injuries. If you're a Cardinals fan or just to me, I would say I would think a successful season for JJ Watt is about 8 sacks because he's not what he used to be by any means. AJ Green, I already kind of talked about him. And if he plays 12 games this season, honestly, I think that's a successful season for Green. I don't think people realize he is not what he used to be by any means. Lots of Bengal fans overrate him and everything. Lots of Bengal fans want him to stay. I would like to see him stay because, we have a young, nice team growing and building. But this past couple of years with Green has just so bad to watch because just how injury prone he is. And it seems like in games last season, particularly, he wasn't even trying. So I really feel like the Watt and the Green signings are actually some of the more overrated signings heading into the season.
I like the Watt signing just because for what it stands for. And like you said, he's up there with the sack leader since 2011. Him and Chandler Jones, obviously, are always up there. Chandler Jones is one of the most underrated defensive edge players. Even they had Dennis Gardeck, who got off to a really good start last year, but then he got hurt down the stretch and missed the rest of the season. But even I look at the Cardinals last year, there was just so many little mistakes they made. Like in the game against Miami, they missed a field goal. The game against the Patriots stopped them on the goal line at the 1 yard line to like not let them score at half, and then it kind of threw everything off. And then Zane Gonzalez missed a field goal that would have won them the game. But then even two, he missed it, let them come down. Isaiah Simmons took a penalty, and even two, everyone calls it the play of the year, but the catch against the Buffalo Bills was pure luck because we saw two things happen in that game. One, that's when Arizona's downfall started, and the other one was Buffalo did not lose another game after that until the AFC Championship game. So it's just the whole it's the misfortunes thing, and even to Green, I understand where you're coming from, but I look at this Cincinnati and Arizona very similarly. Where would AJ Green fit on the 21 Bengals with Boyd, Higgins, and Chase? And then where would Larry Fitzgerald fit in with the new core of Hopkins, Kirk? Now you have Rondale Moore coming in. They hope to expand Andy Isabella's role, I believe. And now you have AJ Green coming in. So I feel like the AJ Green signing really was like the nail in the coffin for Larry Fitzgerald's career, even though he is a lifelong. He's going to be one of those guys where, look, he's loyal to the T where he was a Cardinal his entire career.
I really feel like Larry Fitzgerald is easily one of the most underrated wide receivers of all time because you look at other wide receivers and, you look at their quarterbacks they've played with. Fitzgerald's never really had that amazing guy. He had Palmer for a couple years, but the fact that he has more tackles, Warner for a few years as well. But the fact that he had more tackles and drops really shows how underrated he is. But with Arizona, I'm not trying to talk bad about Arizona. I had them going 8-9, but with just this hard division they're in the NFC West, I think they're capable of having a 9-8 or 10-7 season. I would not be surprised if they had 10 wins, but it's the fact that how hard the division is and how inconsistent Arizona has been. You just mentioned some of those games last season. They should definitely not have won that Buffalo game. There were some games they should have won. I just cannot put everything together. I think, Kingsbury, if they have a down season like 7 wins, I would not be shocked if he was fired. But it's just their inconsistency. If the inconsistency is really why I'm not completely sold on them. But if they were more consistent, I would not be surprised at all to see them in the playoffs. But until they are more consistent and can play at a great basis on offense and defense, I'm not ready to say they're a playoff team quite yet, because we know they've not been in the playoffs since 2015 or 16. So to me, I have to see more from Kingsbury and Murray. I think that they could be a playoff team, especially in a hard division that we're in.
I don't have a problem with the Kyler Murray thing. I think Kyler Murray's there to stay. Michael Bidwell's going to make sure he gets paid. It's Cliff. It's not like this whole, like, we obviously knew there were a package deal coming in. Like, as soon as Cliff Kingsbury was hired in Arizona, we knew Kyler Murray was getting drafted and Josh Rosen was on the outside. With now, like, look, they see, hey, look, we got our franchise quarterback. We've got Kyler Murray. So I don't think Kyler Murray's going anywhere. I still think it's Cliff. If anyone's gone after this year, it's, hey, Cliff, you thinking the downfall? Because I'm blanking on who their OC is. I know Vance Joseph's running defense, and he's done a fairly good job at it. It's just a lot of their guys got to stay healthy. Like, even last year, we saw Patrick Peterson slowly start to fall off, so they brought in Malcolm Butler, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, Malcolm Butler had one of the greatest plays in the history of the league at that very stadium in 2015 in the Super Bowl. But when you look at the Cardinals, you just got to, it's like, okay, the pieces are in place. Now you got to produce. That's all it is. It's like you guys this year. Like the Cardinals and the Bengals, in my opinion, have very similar seasons where, look, they got to make strides and improvements. But I think for the Cardinals, it's, you got to, if they cannot win more than, they have to win 9. I think Cliff, to keep his job, they have to win 9 games, because the NFC this year is going to be the easy, in my opinion, even though they're in a tough division, the NFC is the easier conference to make the playoffs in. Meanwhile, because if you look at the AFC, it's just juggernaut after juggernaut in every single division. Now, obviously, I know there's Kansas City, Buffalo, and then there's the rest, but there's more teams you can make cases for in the AFC to be playing mid to late January football than in the NFC.
Yeah, and you make a great point there, but with Arizona, it's very interesting. And yeah, like what you were saying with Cincinnati, if there's not a certain amount of wins, maybe we see Taylor go or a Cliff Kingsbury go from Arizona. And the NFC just in general is just very interesting because, I mean, with the NFC West being great, the NFC East, it's, last season it was historically bad, but I think it's going to be much improved. I think Dallas will be much improved. I think the Eagles will be down. The Giants will be decent, and Washington will be decent. The NFC North, however, I'm very interested in NFC North because honestly, if Aaron Rodgers starts, I know this sounds crazy. If Aaron Rodgers starts week 1 for Green Bay, or even if he doesn't, I honestly believe, I think the Vikings might win the NFC North. And I'm just very excited for the Vikings this season because I think they were definitely one of the most underrated teams last season. Kirk Cousins threw for over 32 passing touchdowns last year and over 4,000 yards. Dalvin Cook averaged nearly 140 total yards a game last season. Statistically speaking, Justin Jefferson was the best rookie receiver we've ever seen. Adam Thielen had over 10 receiving touchdowns. But their main issue last season was defense. And they got Jalen Twyman at defense tackle from Pittsburgh, who I was a huge fan of. My favorite edge rusher in the class, also from Pittsburgh, Patrick Jones. They got Chaz Surratt, who can be that linebacker, from UNC. They drafted him as well. And they also brought back Mackenzie Alexander, who was with Cincinnati last season. And they signed Patrick Peterson from Arizona on a 1-year deal. I think Minnesota can win the NFC North, and I definitely think they're one of the most underrated teams going into the 2021 season.
With Minnesota, though, like that's the thing that's disappointing because Mike Zimmer's specialty is defense. You should know that best as a Bengals fan. That's why I feel like it was such a disappointing year. They also, I believe, drafted Wyatt Davis out of OSU in the 3rd round. So Minnesota's got the pieces in place. Obviously, going back to a Cincinnati connection, Minnesota lost Riley Reif. to the Bengals. But I'm going to say this, like, if Aaron Rodgers is there, I think the Packers win. Aaron Rodgers is just like, he's that. It's like having I don't know, it's like the Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet with where he's got all the stones, where he's got all the Infinity Stones. Aaron Rodgers is there. He can do enough on his own to win, even though, look, they didn't do much. Now, obviously, they have Amari Rodgers in the draft, Devontae Adams, which I'm still saying going into next year, that's the bigger question mark for Green Bay. Because I think if Rodgers goes, he walks and he's getting paid next offseason. He's going to be the most coveted free agent in the class. But with the North, like Chicago, we don't know. I think Chicago can manage, I think they'll finish in that 8-9 wins fair. If like Mitch Trubisky can do it, I think Fields or Dalton can do it, no problem. Detroit, like, what you're going to get. You're getting probably a max of 4 to 5 wins. It's just, look, if Dan Campbell can make chicken salad out of chicken shit, it'll just look good on the city. And then Minnesota, I say this again, so when I said Cliff Kingsbury is 1 for hot seat, Mike Zimmer's 2, and then Zach Taylor. That's how my top 3 are for hot seat. Because if the Vikings I think have to make the playoffs. If the Vikings don't make the playoffs, I think Zimmer's gone. That's what I honestly think. And even to how you were saying earlier, with all these divisions that are improved, the East, I don't buy into the Cowboys. They have to go out there and prove it defensively for me. I know they brought in Dan Quinn. We'll see what kind of scheme, I was about to say what kind of scheme he's going to bring in, that Seattle scheme that he was running up when he was with Seattle during their Super Bowl runs. But how's Dak going to rebound from his injury? How's Zeke going to handle it? Amari Cooper, I have faith I believe in CeeDee Lamb. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be an excellent receiver for them, but Amari Cooper, I still say this, I think he's gone after this year. I think they're going to try to trade that contract because they're going to have to sign Lamb very soon, and Lamb's obviously the better receiver. And then their offensive line too. It's not what it was even 3 years ago, where their offensive line was one of the best in the league. Now their offensive line's a lot weaker, a little beat up. So we'll see. And my other point, because I know we've talked about this before on your show, where Washington can make a run at it if they get the right quarterback play. But the New York Giants, man, it's all on Daniel Jones. Like, I know everyone likes to say David Gettleman's on a hot seat. No, it's Daniel Jones. Dave Gettleman literally put all the pieces out for him to succeed. We'll see what the offensive line does, because I know it's a weak point of theirs. Their defense is going to be great. He got Kenny Golladay. He got Kadarius Toney. So it's like Daniel Jones. You also do. You're going to have Saquon Barkley back, and going back to Minnesota, Kyle Rudolph. There's no excuses for the New York Giants. There's zero excuses for the Giants not to be better this year. I'm not saying they have to make the playoffs, but if Daniel Jones plays bad, they have 2 first-round picks next year in the draft, and next year's. We'll talk about the Supes. Obviously, we both watch watch college football. There's a quarterback from Cincinnati coming out next year. Just saying, Daniel Jones, you got to play good.
I mean, that was exactly what I was about to say. If the Giants do not get 8 or 9 wins, I could definitely see New York maybe going for a quarterback. Actually, a couple of weeks ago was the 300 days away from the 2022 draft, and I did a way too early mock draft, just the top 10 picks. And the draft order was from Pro Football Network. And with the Giants having 2 first-round picks, they had the Bears pick was actually in the top 10, but that belongs to the Giants with the trade to get Justin Fields, and actually had them getting a quarterback. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but Daniel Jones has to get 8 or 9. His fumbles are an issue. His deep ball accuracy is kind of an issue. His arm strength isn't great. All the pieces are there, like you were saying. He has to do something. 8 or 9 wins to me is, if they have 7 or 6, there's no way Daniel Jones should be the starting quarterback next year for the Giants. Whether they maybe take a quarterback with the Bears pick, or maybe with their actual own first round pick. You mentioned Cincinnati's quarterback. I think there's maybe some other people up there as well. Honestly, I've not really watched much film of the quarterbacks next season, but I know Malik Willis from Liberty. I like him quite a bit. Sam Howell from UNC, really think Spencer Rattler will end up being the first quarterback in the draft. So I don't think they're going to end up getting him. But, going back to some of these other teams, you mentioned the Vikings. I think if the Vikings just had an average Mike Zimmer defense last season, they would have easily made it into the playoffs. And with Rodgers, it's just like, I just don't understand why, all this is happening. Like all this, basically, I don't want to play for you, because we've looked, there's been times where Tom Brady's not had, tons of weapons, but, Rodgers has arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, a top 10 running back, a pretty nice offensive line. and he's one of the best tackles in David Bakhtiari, and he's still complaining about he doesn't know he want to play for him. I understand getting upset about the Jordan Love situation, but it's just kind of it's really annoying because it's like you have the pieces around you. Stop blaming other people, type of deal. You're one of the best quarterbacks of all time. You can elevate your talent in a way. We've seen that with Tom Brady. The Packers past couple of seasons have been capable of going to the Super Bowl. Last season, if it wasn't for that last minute touchdown right before halftime, the Buccaneers scored against the Green Bay's defense. Maybe we see Green Bay in the Super Bowl, but it makes no sense why Rodgers is complaining everything going on in Green Bay, and to me, it's just really, really ridiculous and unnecessary.
You know what? My thing with Aaron Rodgers is, and I've learned this, was apparently in the 2020 draft, the Packers wanted Justin Jefferson. Obviously, the Vikings got him. And then they wanted Brandon Ayuk, and then the 49ers leapfrogged them. So then they decided to trade up and draft Jordan Love when they could have had Michael Pittman Jr., who, by the way, is one of my top candidates for breakout star in 2021. Chase Claypool, T. Higgins. Obviously, you don't regret that now, but I'm just saying, like, you could have done all this, and then for some reason they just decided to draft Jordan Love, and they didn't tell Aaron Rodgers. Like, Andy Dalton apparently was made aware on draft night, hey, there's a good chance we draft a quarterback. Same thing with Cam. Like, Cam knew Mac Jones was coming in. I feel like if you told Aaron Rodgers that, and even for him to come out with that announcement on draft night, it just looks kind of petty on his part. Like, I do fully expect him to be there for training camp, and I've said this before on the show, and I'm going to say it to you. I don't think I said to you directly. If you remember the movie The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler, at the end of the movie where he goes to grab the ball and he just shoves it in the warden's chest and says, put this in your trophy case. Like, what if Aaron Rodgers leads the Packers to the Super Bowl, wins it, and then just does that and says, like, okay, I'm out. Like, I can see that happening because, my big thing with him this year is if you trade him now, you're not going to have as many suitors. Maybe a team like the New York Giants next year says, hey, we got 2 first-round picks in 2022. We'll trade you these for Aaron Rodgers, and then they'll also throw in too, like, I don't know about Daniel Jones, but they'll also throw in too, hey, we can give you like Sterling Shepard and this other piece for him. Like, that's where those 2 picks come into play. But my also thing with the 2 picks of the Giants, I was going to say, is they could easily flip those for the top 10, like what we saw San Francisco do this year, because you know what? Unlike San Francisco, they won't have to mortgage their future, though. They can just trade from, say, if they finish mid to late teens, they can easily get into the top 10 with those 2 picks. Trade those 2 picks for one. I think they'll do it, especially because even the other quarterbacks I was going to say too is there's also Brock Purdy and Keaton Slovis. And then there's Carson Strong out of Nevada. That's another one to look out for this year.
And, it's just really interesting with Green Bay. I would honestly, we've heard rumors for months, if he'll play for Green Bay or, maybe he gets traded. I do not see him getting traded at all. You mentioned the Giants. To me, the Giants are the Giants are the number 2 team. The number 1 team to me is clearly the Broncos. I think they're the only team that has the draft capital and enough talent around him. If Rodgers played for the Broncos right now, I think they're capable of winning the AFC West. I know I sound crazy, but along with the Bengals, I think the Broncos have some of the most underrated young talents, on the roster right now in the league. But I would just be shocked if Rodgers isn't on the Packers week 1. And I know most people think, maybe he doesn't play. I really think he'll play week 1 for the Packers. I would be more shocked if he didn't play than if he did play for Green Bay.
Yeah, like that, because that's the thing with Aaron Rodgers. It's just like, I think everyone at this point doesn't expect him to show up. And then when he shows up, it's going to be, hey, everything's fine. Like, he's going to get, if he does show up, he's going to get asked about it every single day. It's like, hey, what happened with this? When he's just going to, I think he just wants to play football. I think that's literally it. He just wants to play football. And then management decided to go make it complicated and then just be like, oh, hey, by the way, we're also doing, like, we're going to screw you in the long run. And we do want you out of here, when he literally said he wanted a trade request. If they had done it on draft night, they could have gotten an insane haul. Now you think about it, most teams have all their quarterback slots spoken for. There's just a couple where it's like, hey, there's going to be obvious competitions camp, but a lot of teams go through that. But now it's a matter of, you know what? Show up, do your job, and leave. I think that's what it's going to be. When a lot of people have like a 9-to-5 job, when they just hate it, when they literally want to clock in, do their work, and clock out. I think that's Aaron Rodgers' mentality going into 2021. I don't think do we see MVP that we saw in 2020? I don't know. But you know what? Training camp's only less than 2 weeks away, so we'll see. That's going to be that's the biggest question going into training camp for any team.
I really want to see, if Aaron Rodgers goes to training camp for Green Bay, I want to see him like go up to the Green Bay, coaching staff, do a cold stone, Steve Austin stunner to Matt LaFleur, flip him off and drink some beers. I think that'd be pretty funny to see. I mean, people are going to enjoy that a lot, but I mean, that would be really entertaining and definitely get even more, people talking about Rodgers. But Rodgers to me, I fully expect him to play for Green Bay. I mean, I have no sources saying that he will play, obviously, but I just think that he will. The fact that he's not said, you know, like trade me type of deal. I do not want to be a Green Bay Packer type of situation. I would be surprised if he's not with Green Bay.
Yeah, like that's the thing. I don't think. Here's the other thing too. Matt LaFleur is going to get asked about it. I don't think Matt LaFleur has anything to do with this. I think it's more Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst. And it's management. It's a CEO. It's as simple as it is. But it's also harder for them too because there's no owner they have to report to. So I feel like they kind of get a little more free reign than all 31 other teams do. Because think about it, if a random GM had done this, or say if there was an ownership, say if this was the Bears. I'm swapping it because it's the easy division. And Aaron Rodgers is the Bears quarterback, which I know Bears fans right now are being like their smoke's coming out of their ears. But with that, imagine if Ryan Pace went behind the backs and was just like, hey, yeah, so instead of our franchise quarterback, we're going to draft this unproven guy from the Mountain West Conference as our first round pick when we move up to go get him. I don't think ownership's too happy. The fact that you just have your the stocks, people who own stocks of the Packers are the owners, you get a little more leash. So that's the big thing because who's there to fire them,
And the thing with Jordan Love, to me, honestly, looking at his tape, I didn't even think it was a first round talent. I mean, I knew he had potential, but a couple years ago, he's one of my favorite draft prospects of all time. Tyree Jackson from Buffalo. He was an undrafted free agent. He was 6'7", 250. He was like a mobile. He was kind of like Josh Allen in the way, really tall and mobile, but he was kind of built like Roethlisberger. One of my favorite quarterbacks to ever watch. Watching him, who was undrafted, and Jordan Love, who was a first round pick, they were the exact same quarterback. I still to this day do not understand why Love, was a first round quarterback. I know we haven't seen him actually start yet. But the thing to me, if you're going to trade up for somebody, which, I was thinking this, when this was actually happening, they lost Blake Martinez, the linebacker, to the Giants. He traded up. Patrick Queen was available at that pick. To me, I thought of trading up. If you're going to trade for anybody, it's obvious. So they're going to trade it for Patrick Queen. And the fact that's your biggest team need. You trade up to get somebody who lots of people have, question marks about. You don't know, he's a project type of guy. You don't know if he's going to be great. He's not a set in stone. You know what you're going to get. That's the thing, kind of, why some Packers fans were so concerned. Oh, maybe Rodgers is gone. I just thought trading up for Patrick Queen made so much more sense. And then instead you go for Love. And then all this, things have happened with Green Bay the past year or so. This is one of those situations where you make a move and it completely possibly backfires and you get like tons of backlash, far more than you thought you'd ever receive type of deal.
Because that's the big thing with the whole Packers thing where you're right. Like they could have done so much more, but then it's like you decide to do this. You easily took the bad option out. Just wanted to get off this because I've been talking about it for a while. There's still one division in the NFC we didn't address, and that's the South. And the more I think about it, I know Darnold's didn't have the best tenure in New York. Man, Carolina and Atlanta are two very, very wild card teams. If you look at them, they finally have a solid just pocket quarterback. You know what? He's a little bit mobile. And then with Atlanta, we don't really know what we're going to get. I only say that because Julio's gone. Matt Ryan's always kind of their defense is but you got Kyle Pitts, you've got Calvin Ridley, who obviously they're handing the torch off to, Russell Gage. And then the only real question is running back. We'll see what Mike Davis can do. But for the most part, Carolina and Atlanta are two teams that they may catch people off guard. And for the Saints, it's the Saints logic for me is the same as the Patriots. For as long as Sean Payton's their coach, they're going to find ways to win football games.
The Falcons, to me, I think they can maybe get 5 or 6 wins. And you look, if Atlanta would have won the Super Bowl, I think lots of more people would be saying that Matt Ryan's a future Hall of Famer. Honestly, you look at the stats and his record. he could possibly be a Hall of Famer years from now. I'm not saying he should be, but I think it's a debatable conversation. You mentioned the Saints, and I've said this every single time I talk about Jameis Winston. 2019 Jameis Winston is the most 5 years from now, people will be talking about that was one of the most underrated seasons in NFL history. I know I sound crazy, throwing for over 30 interceptions, but the fact that he threw for over 30 touchdowns, over 5,000 yards in his first year with a new head coach with Bruce Arians and an offense coordinator and Byron Leftwich, basically being blind in a way, to me is just very impressive. And I mean, do not even get me started on the Panthers. I am in love with the Panthers and the Vikings this season. The Panthers, to me, I think they are a playoff team. I know it sounds crazy. I think they're capable of getting 8 or 9 wins because I saw a stat. Teddy Bridgewater was 0-8 in potential game winning or game tying drives. Sam Darnold is a much better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater. And if you're Darnold, you can get at least 3 of those. I don't remember how many wins the Panthers had last season, but with Robbie Anderson, somebody who he's already familiar with, playing with Darnold in New York, DJ Moore to me is tied for the most underrated receiver in the NFL right now, along with Tyler Boyd. Christian McCaffrey's coming back from an injury. They have tons of nice guys on defense. They drafted J.C. Horn in the 2020 draft. Every single one of their draft picks were defensive players. That was the first time it's ever happened before. They have lots of young guys on defense who could potentially be future stars, like Derek Brown from Auburn. I just really, really, really like this Panthers team. I mean, cap it off, you got Joe Brady, who's an offensive genius, helping Sam Darnold. I really like the Panthers. Will not be shocked one bit if they're in playoff contention, maybe getting 8 or 9 wins this year.
I don't think the Panthers are going to be a playoff team, but I think they're going to be that team where they can play spoiler for others. Like a good comparable for them from last year would kind of be like, I don't know, I could see them even being like what Vegas did, where Vegas got off to a bit of a hot start, but then down the stretch they just cool off. We're kind of like, hey, everything starts to catch up to them. But if you look at who the Panthers start with, they play the Jets week 1. It's that Sam Darnold revenge game where we also get to see Zach Wilson for the first time, and then with the Falcons, because when you said the Super Bowl, it reminds me of a couple of things. So in that Super Bowl, obviously the main story is the Patriots and their comeback. Julio Jones made one of the best Super Bowl catches of all time in that game, where he had the 2 feet, just his toes to stay in bounds. No one talks about that. It's like the Jermaine Kearse catch from Super Bowl 49. No one talks about it because of the Malcolm Butler interception. It's like going back to say all these like crazy moments. Like imagine if the Santonio Holmes touchdown wasn't to win the game in Super Bowl 43. If in the year before in 42, if David Tyree still makes that catch, but the Giants don't win the Super Bowl, it's a great catch, but it just gets that much more elevated because you win. So that's why as soon as you said that Julio played, or what reminds me of is like, hey, it's talked about, but it's not as magnified or glorified because the Falcons didn't win the game. But I do agree with you in that sense too, where, hey, look, I still think Matt Ryan has a very strong case to get into Canton when his career is said and done. If you look at his stats, his wins, because there's a lot of quarterbacks who did not win the Super Bowl or who did not win a Super Bowl who are in the Hall of Fame. Like if you look at Dan Fouts, Dan Marino, just to name a couple, because that's all I can think of off the top of my head. The amount of quarterbacks who have won, like Phil Simms is not a Hall of Famer. Even if you look at Joe Namath too, I'm just trying to remember if Joe Namath is in or not. He had 30 more interceptions than touchdowns throughout his career. But it's that moment. He had that guarantee in that hotel in Miami, and he had one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history. So it's moments like that. Like I'll let you go in a second, but I just wanted to get it off my chest.
Joe Namath to me is one of the most overrated quarterbacks in NFL history, up there with Kenny Stabler. Kenny Stabler won some titles as well, and I don't remember his numbers, but I believe he had more interceptions and touchdowns, and it just kind of goes to show if you don't win, you're not going to get recognized as much. And I think Ryan could be a Hall of Famer. I definitely think he's capable of being a Hall of Famer. Somebody else is Phillip Rivers. He's one of those guys who never went to the Super Bowl, never had a ton of playoff success, but he threw for about 4,000 yards. Just it seems like every single season. And once those stats start to pile up, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Somebody else, I know Bengal fans don't like it, and I think it's actually kind of debatable. Carson Palmer is maybe a Hall of Famer. I know I'm not trying to be biased because I don't like Palmer, but I believe he's in the top 10 or top 15 in passing yards all time. his record isn't horrible. I believe it's around 500 or so. But I think maybe that's, it's really interesting. Really good quarterbacks who, don't win. It's a lot harder for a quarterback to have great stats, but not a Super Bowl than it is for an average quarterback to win a couple of Super Bowls. Perfect example is Troy Aikman. If Troy Aikman did not have a Super Bowl ring, he wouldn't be a Hall of Famer. I feel like if Tony Romo won a Super Bowl ring, I think, honestly, I mean, this could be a whole, big topic, but Romo to me, he never won a ring, but I actually think he was kind of underrated in a way. But with Aikman, winning 3 Super Bowls, he was average. I mean, at best, he had Michael Irvin, he had Emmitt Smith. It's crazy to see how much, if you have a ring and if you have a championship to your name, how much that helps you in the Hall of Fame case and, making your name mainstream, if that makes sense.
One case, though, of a person who did that who didn't get in is Phil Simms. Phil Simms is not in the Hall of Fame. Joe Namath did get in 1985, but Joe Namath, it's like Eli Manning. Eli is going to get in because of his 2 Super Bowls. Because if you look at his stats, or like from not even his stats, but if you look at his career from that second Super Bowl to when he retired, that's not Hall of Fame numbers. You have 2 Lombardis against one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history. That's something no one else can lay claim to. He can't. Like I have the biggest love-hate relationship with the man in the world just because of how funny he is online and stuff. And it's just like, you remember Anchorman when Ron Burgundy and Wes Mantooth, when he's coming up the stairs from the Panda enclosure, he's like, I hate you, but God damn it, I respect you. That's me with Eli. That's me with Eli. Like, you caused me so much pain. Yet, but yeah, no, and Eli, I think also too, his name, I think his name is going to help a lot for his Hall of Fame case. I think in fact, if let's just flip the script. If Chris Simms had done what Eli Manning had done, who knows if he gets in? I know Chris Simms was an average quarterback at best in the NFL, at best. And hot takes galore. He's probably had a better broadcasting career, and even he says he's the guy who obviously says a lot of things where he says it just to be a hot take and to get under people's skins, but he hopes he pans out, like him putting Kellen Mond in his top 3 quarterbacks from this year. But I just wanted to throw that out too. If Chris Simms had done what Eli Manning had done, I don't know if we're making as strong of a case from his camp. And I think the fact that he has the Manning name attached to him, that's going to go a long way as well.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think Manning, take away the Super Bowls, he is not a Hall of Famer at all. And I'm trying to find a post here. I have my podcast, but before I still currently have a Bengals fan page and everything, and I'm trying to find a stat I posted once Eli Manning retired, and lots of people, I had lots of hate, and because I compared the numbers between Andy Dalton and Eli Manning, they're actually very, very, very similar. I actually did the poll, whose numbers would you rather have, Eli Manning's or Andy Dalton's? And I didn't say who they were. I just put the numbers side by side. And actually, more people picked Andy Dalton than Eli Manning. And it just kind of goes to show, if you have a ring, if you're a quarterback more than any other position, if you're an average quarterback, if you won a Super Bowl, your chances of being in the Hall of Fame skyrocket far more than you can imagine. But it sucks in a way, because you look at some quarterbacks or just other players in different positions. If you don't have that popularity or a Super Bowl ring, you might not get in. For example, Ben Riley, he was a corner for the Bengals. I believe he had 65 interceptions in his career. He's 5th all time in interceptions. He was never a Pro Bowler. 5th all time in interceptions. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Every single player, I believe, in the top 8 or 10 is in the Hall of Fame, but not him. And it just kind of goes to show, if you don't have that, popularity or rings, people don't talk about you, and your chances of the Hall of Fame are very, very slim.
The other player I want to make a case for the Hall of Fame, sorry, I just get an itch. What was I going to say? It's like, for example, then you have guys, though, where it's like Drew Brees, where he has a ring. I know obviously he didn't get back his stats. I think if Drew Brees never had gotten a Super Bowl ring, what he did in New Orleans and his stats alone would get him in 100%. That's like, because like the Hall of Fame too, it's not only a mix, because I know obviously there's a lot of popularity and like, hey, what did you do or what your accolades are, get you in there. But if you look at rings just help your case more, because it's like all those guys go ring chasing, where it's like you want to see them get their one. it's like I can't even say this year. I was going to try to think of the last time that was. It was kind of like what people felt with the Philadelphia Eagles for winning theirs. It was like cool to see the franchise get it after so much long suffering. But with the Hall of Fame too, you have your difference between your guys where it's like popularity gets them in and winning gets them in and what their stats do. Like when Drew Brees goes in, he's going to be one of those guys like Peyton Manning this year where it's just, you know what, there's no one who's going to argue against it on that committee. And I said this on my last podcast Tuesday. I would love to sit in on the selection committee picking who goes into the Hall of Fame. I feel like that's like the biggest 100 drunk guys in a bar argument of all time. It's like the greatest, like it's when you think of the greatest football minds, it's a Pro Football Hall of Fame selection committee because you even have some former players on there too. Like Tony Dungy's a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame of the selection committee. Excuse me.
I actually found this stat here. It took me a minute, but throughout Eli Manning's career and Andy Dalton's career, looking at the two, Eli Manning averages one more passing yard per game than Andy Dalton. Passing yards per game, Eli Manning 1.5, Andy Dalton 1.5. Eli Manning actually averages 1.03 interceptions per game. Andy Dalton averages 0.88 interceptions per game. Eli Manning's record is exactly 500, being 117 and 117. Dalton's record is 70, 61, and 2, and that goes out to 52%. So I think I'm not saying Andy Dalton's better than Eli Manning. That's not just what I'm saying at all. But it's just a fact, like, if you're a top market team and if you have that ring, you're going to go. If you're average, you're going to go in the Hall of Fame far more likely than a great player who's for a small market like the Bengals, the Lions, or something like that.
It's a very fair argument to make, but I think at the same time too, I was going to say Chris, Phil Simms, like I said, not in. Otis Anderson too, his running back, not in the Hall of Fame. So I think a lot of it does go into as well. Like, look, hey, winning multiple. Going on to one thing I want to talk about earlier, because obviously we all know I'm a fan of them, and we left them out of our NFC South talk. But like, I think for the Bucs, it's going to be, look, this year no one's doubting them. No one's going to be, hey, what's going to go on? It's the Bucs are going to go into this year like last year's Kansas City Chiefs. Everyone's just going to expect them to be in the Super Bowl. But the fact that there was the report that came out today about him playing the entire, I saw some weird articles. I saw one that said he played the entire year on a torn MCL. I saw stuff he played on it was a partial tear for a bit of the year. But the fact that he won a Super Bowl with that significant of an injury, like, how can you deny that that's the greatest player of all time? And even the one thing I'm going to say, because I saw it earlier this week that really irks me, is the fact that like Mahomes already has like certain stats where he's already beaten Tom, and like when you compare their careers at this point, the biggest difference between the two is one was a 6th round pick, one was a 1st round pick. And you know what? Actually, I'm done. I don't like comparing the two of them. Why? 7-1. That's the only comparison I will say to you. 7-1. And I also think this, for as much as I love the team, and they're on my cup right now. You see that logo right there. And it's, you can tell right here says Patriots, and there's a Starbucks lady. It's custom made. The Patriots, I think, set an unhealthy precedence for the rest of the league to think that winning is so easy. I want to see what the Kansas City Chiefs can do without Travis Kelce, without Tyreek Hill, without Andy Reid coaching, you know? Like how Bill Belichick was able just to keep cycling in players, and how Tom waited until he waited forever to get his bag, to get his money. He was always giving back money for the betterment of the team. I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but that Mahomes contract, like, I think he's going to have to give him back quite a bit of money to help his team down in the run, because Tyreek Hill said he didn't want to, and I know Mahomes did this year. We'll see what happens. And the only other reason to why I don't like the Chiefs is for stuff like the Frank Clark incident. I don't know if you saw this, where he got arrested for having an Uzi in his car, which he tried putting off as it was his bodyguards, which is I know in the States weapons are legalized as long as they're registered. An Uzi is an illegal weapon to have unless you're in the military. So we'll see what happens there.
And I mean, with the MCL injury with Tom Brady, I mean, I'm not even going to lie. I don't like Brady, but he's became more likable since he's went to Tampa Bay, in my opinion. But the more Super Bowls than any other, franchise in NFL history. When you look at other sports, for example, the NBA Finals, there'd be players who get, poked in the eye, he'll be on the floor for 5 minutes, barely able to play and everything. But Brady's playing against, a much more serious injury than any of us really expected, and be able to play great in the Super Bowl. And comparing Mahomes to Tom Brady is stupid. It's like comparing young players who are coming into the NBA who played for a couple of seasons, comparing them to like LeBron or Jordan or something like that. There's just certain players you don't compare people to. And unless they have the rings or unless they've actually played the same amount of years as they have, comparing them is not worth it, and it makes absolutely no sense. You're just trying to make a storyline. It's not even a storyline. I know Max Kellerman, he freaking loves Patrick Mahomes, but I agree with what you said. I want to see Mahomes without Kelsey, without Tyreek Hill, see what he can do on his own, because I think that Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks we have seen. But I think Mahomes wasn't drafted by the Chiefs. The Bengals actually had, I believe, a couple picks before the Bengals. We took John Ross, which looking back was horrible. But if we took Mahomes at with our first round pick, he's not going to have near as much success with Cincinnati as opposed to a genius and Andy Reid. I really want to see. I agree with what you said there, Mahomes without some of his top targets. Because comparing Mahomes to Brady and Mahomes to Rodgers and some of these other guys who've been, the top quarterbacks for over a decade now, Mahomes has had about 3-4 good seasons. Stop comparing people just to get a storyline, in my opinion.
The only thing I will say about the Chiefs is, though, every year people do this with the Patriots, where they're like, hey, is this the year they kind of take a back seat? I am not doing that by any stretch of the imagination with the Chiefs. Because look at this 2019. No one thought they were going to do anything. They won the Super Bowl the year he got hurt. So that's what I'm just here to say. It's just like, I'm not doubting Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the league right now by far. Is he the greatest of all time? No, do not even start that conversation yet. I think, it's like the whole argument of, oh, if he retired today, can he make it to the Hall of Fame? It's just like, I hate those certain arguments. I hate, but you know what? Talking heads have to say it because they get paid to do it. Meanwhile, I come on here for fun and just give the thoughts that I sometimes talk to myself when I'm in my car driving to work. That's I'm not afraid to admit that. That's what this is an outlet for, to come here on, whether if you're listening to via podcast, if it's YouTube, whatever. That's all I had to say. But because that's the thing though. It's just, I know I'm going off topic, but it's just like, look, let's not compare now, compare when the two are done, even though the two of them could still be going on for another 25 years for all we know. Excuse me, but but going back to my point from earlier, for all people are going to say, oh, hey, I think this is the year that someone's going to overtake the Chiefs. No, I think there's a very good chance that the Chiefs not a very good chance. The Chiefs will probably be in the AFC Championship game, which I don't know if you saw his tweet today from Adam Schefter, but he basically released all the league important dates for this year, and it's January 30th. So I fully expect January 30th at 3 o'clock, because this year is an even number of years. So it's going to be in Arrowhead at 3 o'clock. That's my early prediction. Mark my words.
And what you were saying, talking about, top people, it's weird because you see people like Stephen A. Smith, who is just absolutely crazy and makes stupid crap up, get paid millions of dollars. What?
I was saying Stephen A. Smith, not the best week in the world after his. I'm not going to get into it, but he had the two comments about he had the Ohtani comments and then the Nigerian basketball comments. He's not having a good week.
But guys like Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, Max Kellerman, those guys make stupid takes that people hate. And did you hear about this? And then they watch it. For example, we both have podcasts. If we say something like that, oh, this is so stupid, if we were on the TV, people would be talking about it. But since we have like a small following, I guess, people aren't going to be talking about it as much. But with the Chiefs, I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the AFC Championship by any means. But I just don't see them being in the Super Bowl. I really think, I know it's kind of painful to say it, and I'm going to be one of the few Bengal fans to actually admit it. I think the Browns are going to be in the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be the Browns between the Buccaneers or Rams. I think that every single time I've done a prediction thing 2 or 3 different times, week 1 to 18 in the playoffs, I keep going back to the Browns. And then against Tampa Bay with the Rams, I would kind of be surprised if the Browns are not in the playoffs. I know Kansas City has a far better quarterback, and so does Buffalo. But Mayfield has more talent around him, so he doesn't have to elevate the talent. He just needs to play average compared to Mahomes playing great. When he has guys like Hill and Kelsey, and with the Browns defense. I feel more comfortable with the Browns defense and some of their guys they've recently signed and drafted because they're one of the best rosters in the league and they're one of the best free agencies in the league. But they actually also have one of the best drafts as well. I don't think people talk about it enough. And I think I would kind of be surprised to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this season.
Like I say, it's like that's like what I said earlier. I feel like we say that, but then they just go like, "Hey, we're here." But no, like I want to see. I think the Browns have a very good chance. It's just if they stay healthy. But if I had to compare the Browns to the Bills, like I think I give the edge to quarterback to Buffalo, but running game and receivers, you gotta, even though the running backs is the Browns, receivers, I know Landry and OBJ are good, but man, Diggs is just something else. But it's defense. Cleveland's pass rush this year, Jadeveon Clowney with Myles Garrett is going to be unbelievable, and that's Buffalo's weak point. So we'll see how they do. Like, and my other thing with Buffalo too is, and obviously we know, like we have the same thing. You're a Bengals fan, you hate the Browns. I'm a Patriots fan, I hate the Bills. I want to know how the Bills do with that target on their back, because last year no one expected them to play as well as they did and go 13-3. They're the hunters. They're the hunted now. They were the hunters for 20 years. They were always chasing down that crown. Now that they're the hunted, I want to see how they live up to that pressure and that hype, because for all we know, Josh Allen takes a backseat. Do I expect it? No. I'm preparing it. I'm not preparing for it though, but it wouldn't shock me if it happened.
And it wouldn't really shock me either. And that's something I think, there's so many storylines. Some quarterbacks, they can lose their starting jobs. Some coaches can lose their starting jobs, but there's other storylines like that. It just makes it really interesting. You mentioned me hating the Browns. I hate the Browns, but I do not hate the Browns as much as the Steelers. It's not even close. And there's times I hate the Ravens more than the Browns as well. I know it's kind of weird, but I'm really interested in Josh Allen, and I think it is possible we see him maybe decline just a tad bit, because this past season he was phenomenal. But in the way, I do kind of think he maybe could improve even more, because I was so shocked to see Brian Daboll stay with the Buffalo Bills. I thought for sure he was going to be a head coach somewhere, and he's been a huge part of Josh Allen's development. Josh Allen's rookie season, I believe their total offense was around 29th. This past season, they were in the top 5. So he's been a huge part in Josh Allen's success. And with him being here in Buffalo for surprisingly this season, I wouldn't be surprised if Allen maybe had even a slightly better season than he did compared to last year. But it just seems like for the most part, just about every single division is just so interesting. And compared to the last couple of seasons, last year it was a toss up. At this point, we weren't even for sure, the season was going to happen on schedule. But at this point, I feel like there's a lot more storylines and just so many fun stories to keep an eye on compared to the last several years.
Yeah, because this year's going to be a normal year. This year, like every stadium is going to be full. Every team's going to be good to go, ready to go. Hopefully, COVID's not an issue with any of the teams. Hopefully, there's none of that. But obviously, we know there are certain players who spoke out. I'm not going to go into details about it, but obviously, we all know what Cole Beasley has said online. It's just a big wait and see thing. The only thing I'll say for the Josh Allen stuff is, if Bills fans truly want to be thankful for someone besides Brian Daboll, Jordan Palmer. That's the only other thing I wanted to add in, is that Jordan Palmer is a huge reason why Carson Wentz is bad. And not Carson Wentz is bad. I do not know why I said that. For why Josh Allen is good. And then you have, so that's another thing I wanted to bring up quickly. A lot of these guys who didn't really work out as good quarterbacks in the NFL have made other careers elsewhere. Like look at Chris Sims, look at Dan Orlovsky, Jordan Palmer. Just those are 3 guys right there. Didn't have the best NFL careers, but you know what? Did good after their careers were over.
Jordan Palmer is basically like a Bengals living legend. He played a couple games for us and absolutely sucked. And then he's had a nice, he's got to coach all these guys like Justin Fields and other people like that. Dan Orlovsky is somebody who I just think is really interesting, because he did not have a good NFL career, and now he's been with ESPN for several years, and now he's one of the their bigger guys on NFL Live. I don't watch ESPN. I hate ESPN with a passion, but with Orlovsky, it's just when he was playing in the NFL, you just did not think he was going to be one of those guys to fill the roles like Trey Wingo on NFL Live and people like that. And we've seen other people too. For example, Byron Leftwich. He played in the NFL some, but he was basically injury prone for the majority of his career, and now he's an offense coordinator with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and possibly, he could have a head coaching job next season. He's probably one of the top candidates going to next year. But it is kind of crazy seeing these guys who just did not have good careers going into coaching careers. It's just something you don't really expect, and that's something you kind of see more so from. I'm not a big baseball fan, but that's something you kind of see more so from baseball than opposed to football.
The more I think about it, you actually kind of see it in all the sports, like hockey, baseball, basketball, and football. You see it where a lot of the guys who become coaches are the guys who didn't have the most successful careers because they were, even though a lot of people say, oh, you were a bench warmer, they were learning. Like I know you don't watch ESPN. Listening to Dan Orlovsky break down film is some of the best stuff in the world. And if you tweet at him, he will tweet you back. Like I've had a few interactions with him on Twitter. Stand-up guy. And the only other thing I'll make for former Bengals whose careers were cut short doing well, David Pollock. Even though that was very, very different circumstances, but you know what? He's done great with ESPN for the college coverage.
Yeah, college game day, that is, aside from games, college game day is about the only thing I actually will watch on ESPN. I'm a big college football fan, but I've not really paid much attention to it, this upcoming season as opposed to years past. But yeah, David Pollock's definitely probably my favorite college football, broadcaster and everything. And you kind of mentioned interactions, kind of, switching gears, we could kind of talk about, whatever. Actually was able to, well, do you pay, I know we kind of talked about every time we talk mostly. Have you been watching any AEW recently?
Yes, I haven't watched like a crazy amount of it, but like I know what's going on just because like a lot of the times with like in the summer, obviously, for as much as I like to watch wrestling, like if something does come up, I'm not gonna like be like, oh hey, sorry, I can't. I'm staying home to watch wrestling. I did it when I was like 13 or 14, but I'm not doing that when I'm 27. But
Yeah,
I know what's going on with AEW. I follow AEW more now than WWE.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing when I was like 14, 15, 16, because like with, back then to me that was the prime WWE. But last week, I was able to actually attend like a card con, like sports card collection type of thing. And I got to meet Darby Allin from AEW. It was really cool because I was actually in like a Q&A type thing with him. I asked him who his dream opponent was, and he said, Malachi Black, which was A-lister Black in WWE, and that thing was actually on. That's been on like a ton of wrestling articles. That was on Inside the Ropes, different things like that. Wrestling Inc. or different things like that. I thought it was pretty cool, being featured on some of those things. And another topic with wrestling, I saw something earlier today. I don't keep up with WWE like I used to. I pay attention to AEW far more than WWE. I saw something a couple hours ago. It was announced that Goldberg is going to be back on Raw in a couple weeks. This makes absolutely no sense. This is why people don't watch your product. People were expecting Lesnar to come back and face Bobby Lashley at SummerSlam and possibly see Cena against Reigns, which to me was probably one of my all-time favorite feuds in WWE. I know it was a short feud, but I liked it a lot. Cena and Reigns, you want ratings up, it's going to be your ratings thing. People wanted Lesnar against Lashley when Lesnar had the title several years ago and Lashley was just coming back into the WWE scene. With Lesnar possibly coming back, it's very interesting. WWE posted something that involved Lesnar several days ago, and Paul Heyman posted something that had something to do with Lesnar a week or so ago as well. But why? I don't get it. Goldberg, okay, you're going to get a jackhammer, you're going to get a spear, you're going to have a promo that ends with "you're next." It just makes no sense. Stuff like this is why people stop watching your product. The fact that you bring it back makes zero sense. It makes I just do not understand it because Bobby Lashley and Lesnar, those are two guys who have had some martial arts careers. Goldberg's in his 40s or 50s and can barely have a match. I believe it was the I don't the whatever it was called, the Greatest Royal Rumble or something like that. He had that match where against the Undertaker or somebody or something, and he like almost seriously got hurt. I just I don't know why WWE continues to do this when they have a prime opportunity to get people who don't watch it often, like myself, back into it, but they completely are about to drop the ball and completely mess it up.
People ask me why, like when people ask why, hey, why don't you watch WWE? Like the last time I watched Raw was 3 months ago. That's why. That's all I'm gonna add to it. You covered basically everything that I wanted to say. Um, the only thing that's exciting with WWE is, look, I'll probably watch tomorrow night when there aren't fans back in the arena for the first time ever in Houston, Texas. So we'll see how that goes. But for the most part, it's just AEW. The only other thing I'll say that was comparable for me for wrestling too. So on this, obviously, if you go through my YouTube channel, I have all various different kinds of. It's a lot more podcasts now. I have some unboxings and stuff like that. But when I used to do reaction videos, and I still do for like the Royal Rumble, I may do it for Money in the Bank. Um, for Royal Rumble 17, when we thought Samoa Joe was coming out and Roman Reigns came out, and we had this horrible reaction video, got like 5,000-6,000 views. Like a bunch of like wrestling networks were stealing it to like use it for like their videos showing various fans. And I'm getting people messaging me like, hey, you're on this website. I'm like, what the fuck? And then it's just like, hey, then there's me. If you want to go scroll, if you scroll down my YouTube after this, it's in there. It's around 2017. So you have to go to about the 4-year ago mark. That's all I got to say. But the only other thing just to add for today was just that, just if they feel like it's a good time to wrap things up here. But yeah, I'm not that close to 100. This is now so I think I've been on yours of 3 or 4 times now. And I've been on here, and then now this is your 3rd time on here. Cause I remember you were one of the guests back in the early days, like I remember it was about a week before the 2020 draft. And then first time on here in about 6-7 months, but it was good. It was good having you on today. Is there anything you want to add to the show before we wrap up?
Thanks for having me. This is I have lots of guests on my show. Like you said, you've been on here on my show a couple of times. I'm not really on shows often, but I really appreciate you having me on. People who are watching me, you can find me the Sports Dude Heniz Show on Instagram and Twitter, and then the Sports Dude Heniz Show on YouTube. I mainly talk about the NFL, but I'll talk a little bit about college football. Also the NBA tad bit, occasionally the MLB, but not often. And then the wrestling, I'm trying to get into more wrestling. Also trying to get into more like entertaining and just kind of stupid storylines. We were talking the other day about some, movie remakes and different stuff like that. So, basically football, wrestling, and basketball is kind of my main topics. If you're into that, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for having me on stuff.
No problem. And folks, with that wraps up episode number 97 of YWC Football Talk. I got 2 more episodes and then I'm at 100. Well, anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. Jordan, thank you once again for coming on. And folks, have a good night, and we'll see you for episode 98.